we're gonna watch the entirety of this segment of Trump talking about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the way he talked about it on the campaign trail, and this just shows not only such a stark transformation for Trump, but it shows how even that transformation cannot protect American policy from the amount of ignorance of the President of the United States. And once again, just like in 2015, 2016, the things that people are whispering to me is like, oh, don't worry about the adults in the room. Even though a lot of the pitch this time was the adults in the room won't be in the room anymore. They're not gonna, the deep state's not gonna hold them back, etc. But I need to show you guys this because he's talking about real current policy that affects lives on the battlefield right now. And he's talking about it with zero reference for the timeline, zero basic knowledge about what's causing what or what's going on. And he's getting briefings right now. He's about to be president of the United States. So he's getting daily briefings just like Joe Biden is. And he still is saying stuff like this. But let's listen. Let's listen to this, then we'll talk about it. So there's two things to watch here. Number one, see if you can catch the thing he says in here, which is missing by more than 1.5 miles. And number two, just look for the transformation from where he was talking about the war earlier in the war. Oh, we're going to end it 24 hours. And now he's talking about it now.
Because China and the United States can together solve all of the problems of the world, if you think about it. So it's very important. Is being recorded, and that includes soldiers. The soldiers are being... More difficult is going to be the Russia-Ukraine situation. I see that as more difficult.
When you say there will be...
I don't think they should have allowed missiles to be shot 200 miles into Russia. I think that was a bad thing. And that brought the Koreans in, you know, North Korea, another man I get along with very well. I'm the only one that does. But that did a lot of bad things. I don't think that should have been allowed, not when there's a possibility, and certainly not just weeks before I take over. Why would they do that without asking me what I thought? I wouldn't have had them do that. I think that was a big mistake they made.
Will you reverse that decision when you're in office to let those
I might, yeah.
missiles be?
I thought it was a very stupid thing to do.
And when you...
What should Zelensky, if anything, be prepared to give up to end this war?
Prepared to make a deal.
Do you have anything in mind to end this
He
war?
should be prepared to make a deal. That's all. Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's hard. Too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal too.
What deal would you
Putin has to make a deal, and Putin would have never gone in if I was president. If I was president, we wouldn't have had inflation. Our oil prices would have been lower. I had a good relationship with Putin. He would, despite the Russia hoax, which made it more difficult. If we had that election, if it were an honorable election, we wouldn't have had any of the problems that we're talking about right now. Putin would have never got in.
Before you take office, do you still think you can make that deal? Will you ask Putin to give up Assad?
Well, I hadn't thought of it. I think we have to get on with our lives.
We have to get on with our lives in reference to Assad. If he should go to prison, if Russia should give him up to like the courts, say, yeah, just, you know, let bygones be bygones. You know, take every day one step at a time. Carry on, just carry on. Sorry. Okay, I'll let this finish quick. I haven't interrupted any of it. I've been very good about this.
Right now, Syria has a lot of, you know, there's a lot of indefinites. Nobody knows what's going to happen with Syria. But I think Turkey is going to hold the key to Syria, actually. I don't think you've heard that from anybody else, but I've been pretty good at predicting.
Okay. So this was beautiful to me because I think this right here is not peak Trump in the idea this is the funniest thing Trump's done or this is the most entertaining thing Trump's done, is that this shows a lot of the character traits in Trump rolled into one like 2-minute policy section. And the policy section happens to be in the area that we at this channel care about quite a lot. It also happens to be the largest war in Europe since World War II and currently going on in the world. So I would say quite an important issue, but it's the one that we particularly care about. So first thing about this that to me was just absolutely beautiful is that when Ukraine comes up, he says that Ukraine's more complicated and it's the one that's less likely to be dealt with than the wars going on in the Middle East. I mean, because he thinks that it's more complicated. Now, he was saying he was going to end this war within 24 hours. That was what he was throwing out. 24 hours and the war was going to be over. Some people even suggested, his sycophants online, Tim Pool and the others, suggested online, oh, well, actually, the war's going to be over within 24 hours of him being elected. It's going to be... Now, Donald Trump's saying, it's complicated. It's complicated because, yes, of course it's complicated. It's a war that's extended... That's an extension of hundreds of years of history of conflict and suppression of the Ukrainian national identity and reprisals and etc. That went into a war that's been going on for over 10 years, for over a decade now. Yeah, it's to think that you can move in there where the best diplomats of the world have failed, as somebody who was not really much of a deal maker during his time in office, even if that's the, he wrote Art of the Deal, that's kind of his image. But he didn't really do that legislatively. The closest that he got to that was his arrangements with normalization with Israel and the Middle East, which is not necessarily in the best place in the world right now. Maybe it'll be revisited and touched up again in the second administration. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. But he's not exactly like a diplomatic Michael Jordan. And he talked about it as if he was. And the thing is every time he says some ridiculous bullshit like that, instead of being laughed out of the room, he's taken like semi-seriously. This is taken seriously semi. And people think, how is he going to do it? How is he going to end the war in 24? He doesn't have a plan. There was never a plan. It was just that people like the idea of a really bloody war to be over. If there was less war, that'd be good. And so if he can promise you the moon, if he can promise you the stars, if he can promise you, the big rock candy mountain, where the streams are, cream soda and the flowers have gumdrops on them. If that's what he can promise to you, then, it's going to sound good. And in comparison to a candidate where, their pitch was, I'm like the last guy, but I'm not like the last guy because I see the polling numbers on the last guy, but I'll take the achievements of last guy. And all of my new policy proposals is going to be stuff that, is up 2 to 3 paragraphs long of like tax breaks and tax credit here, tax credit there, etc. It wasn't as compelling of a message as all the bad shit's done. Okay, the war is going to be done. The inflation is going to be done. Grocery store prices are going to go down because I'm a businessman. I do business. So businessman make price go down. So businessman make deal. Deal maker, art of deal man make deal. 24 hour make deal. And it had to be taken semi-seriously. And now here we are. And now he's going to call it more complicated. Now this standard that he set, the 24-hour thing, is going to be forgotten about so quickly. It's going to be forgotten about in 24 hours after his first day in office. And once that, the peace hasn't been made that quickly, it's going to be treated like, what do you mean? Of course, 24 hours. That was, when he didn't really mean 24 hours. He just meant he wanted the war generally to be done, within his term. You're gonna watch that goal shift so quickly. Anyway, that's the first thing. The second thing, and that's just a tiny thing. The second thing that I find beautiful about this is he pivots over to long-range missile strikes. Mind you, he pivoted. He pivoted to long-range missile strikes. Trump chose to go from this war's more complicated than I thought, oopsie boopsie, over to, hey, long-range missiles. What do I think? I think that's a no-no. I think that was a bad idea to approve long-range missile strikes because they made the North Koreans enter the war. He pivots to a topic nobody asked about and then proceeds to get the most basic of information about that topic wrong. You don't need to be that well informed. And I got to remind you, he's getting daily briefings. He's not paying attention. He's not paying attention in the daily briefings. And we remember reports from the last administration where his staff was desperately trying to get him to pay attention to daily briefings by highlighting different words, different colors, bolding this text, bolding that text, trying to, maybe trying to add pictures there. I'm sure they were going to get Bozo the Clown to try to present it instead, to try to get him to pay attention to these briefings. And so he's not paying attention. He doesn't know the day-to-day, but he's commenting on the day-to-day. And so he's saying that the North Koreans entered after long-range strikes. The North Koreans entered and then long-range strikes were approved. In fact, what eventually pushed the Biden administration to allow long-range strikes, it was not a strategic shift on the battlefield, or because, you know, the balance of power had shifted for how useful it could be, or to meet a specific strategic objective. It was in response to both repeated Ukrainian demands for this one more tool in their tool belt, and the more immediate response was to the North Korean troop deployments in the Kursk. It was seen as we need to respond to this some way, and this was the trigger that he pulled. And it was easier when, you know, Trump's coming into office. What, Putin's going to start World War III when he has a chance of maybe talking it out or having some other options in 2 months? No, it doesn't make any sense. He had more cover than even usual. But the main point here is that, like, the timeline's completely in reverse. I mean, this would be like saying, I don't know, it'd be like saying the American Revolution began, and because of that, the British had to tax the American colonies as a reprisal. So I think the American Revolution was a bad idea. No, it was the taxes and then the revolution. If you mess up that order, and you're going to be the one that's finding, like, the magic 24-hour solution. I mean, come on. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but I don't know what else to do. And then after this, he then sweeps over, pivots again from the, you know, him talking about how it's a bad thing that the Ukrainians are bombing the airfields with American weapons, that are bombing their cities or taking out the ammo storage or command centers. That's a bad thing. After he says that, he then moves over again, this time to the fact that he actually won in 2020 and that it was rigged, and that's what he was talking about. I know he kind of stuck it in there, but he just starts randomly talking about how if he had won, which was the real thing, is that he was the winner, and the injustice was not done upon him, then the Russians would have never invaded because he would have been president, and he had a good relationship with Putin, so that wouldn't happen. And so, sandwiched in his, I would have saved everything if I was president, as if Donald Trump could separate hundreds and hundreds of years of Russian-Ukrainian relations just through the appearance of the main star of The Apprentice. Donald, I'm sorry. Where is he, by the way? Where is this? I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the background here. What? Is this like... Where is this? This is in the government building, is it? This is Mar-a-Lago, isn't it? I'm trying to make it out, and I'm like, I can't make out anything besides there's a ton of gold. I think this is Mar-a-Lago. Is it? Does anybody in chat know? Yeah, it is. Yeah, I was like, the only thing... Look, there's a ton of gold. It must be a Trump property. Or at least painted gold. My goodness. He has a moment to talk about the war he said he's going to solve in 24 hours, and he uses it to pivot into the fact that he actually won in 2020. Which, by the way, I was told that this wasn't going to happen anymore. Now that he won, there's no need for the revenge campaign, as he's now going out and suing pollsters for giving him bad polls. He's going out and he's suing news organizations. He's like, I mean, like, the revenge campaign, I think Donald Trump's going to be more than happy to engage in, if given the opportunity and the tools to do so, which I don't think Mike Johnson's going to hold back on giving him the tools to do so. It's going to be a question about those in his administration, and he's been much more careful about picking loyalists. But, like, he's still focusing on this. He's still going out of his way to mention, like, I actually won, even when talking about the largest war in the world currently going on. And I could see it right now where he's trying to negotiate between these two people, and he's just... You know, press conferences with the public, just like, you know, this would have never happened if you know, the rightful thing happened in 2020. Just reminding the world every time he speaks, as everyone's paying attention to see what's going to happen to the largest war in the world, that, oh yeah, the current president of the United States does not respect the votes of the people. It's kind of embarrassing, honestly. Because I know that, like, Ukrainians and Germans and Finns and Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, and, you know, people all over Europe, but all over the world are, like, listening to these statements, trying to discern exactly what Donald Trump's going to do, because we're hearing conflicting reports. We know that, you know, J.D. Vance has one plan, Keith Kellogg has another plan, and I'm sure Donald Trump has a plan of his own, or at least he's leaning towards one plan or another plan. We hear that one report from the Financial Times about possible continued aid. He's calling it complicated now. And as people are trying to discern this, they're just being constantly reminded of that fact for really no reason outside of his own ego. He's not even president yet. We're at negative. We're not even at 4 years yet. We're at 4 years in, I think, 2 weeks. It feels like 4 years already. It beats you down. It beats you down, and it's not gentle. Do. It was hyperbole, libtard. Oh, I didn't think about that. HP. That's a good point.